There's a single detail in Stranger Things that everyone has seen, but nobody has truly understood. A detail so small, so easy to dismiss, that it's been hiding in plain sight since the very first season. And once you see it, once you truly understand what it means, you'll never be able to watch Eleven the same way again. Because this detail proves something that changes everything we thought we knew about her character. It proves that Eleven was never normal. Not before the lab. Not before the experiments. Not even before she was born. She was always something else. Something other. Something that should not exist in our world, but does. The detail is this: Eleven doesn't blink like a normal human being. I know what you're thinking. That sounds ridiculous. Blinking is automatic, unconscious. Everyone blinks differently. It doesn't mean anything, except it does. Because human beings blink in very specific patterns. We blink every 3 to 4 seconds on average. We blink more when we're thinking, less when we're focused. We blink rapidly when we're surprised or stressed. These patterns are hardwired into our neurology. They're part of how our brains regulate information processing. They're so fundamental to being human that we don't even think about them. But Eleven's blinking doesn't follow human patterns at all. Watch her in Season 1. Really watch her. Count the seconds between blinks. Sometimes she goes 15, 20, even 30 seconds without blinking. Her eyes stay wide open, unmoving, staring with intensity that should be physically impossible. And then suddenly she'll blink 3 or 4 times in rapid succession. Not because she's stressed or surprised, but seemingly at random, like her body is remembering it's supposed to blink and overcorrecting. In the scene where she's sitting in Mike's basement, eating the Eggos, she stares at the box for 42 seconds without blinking once. 42 seconds. Try it yourself right now. Try to keep your eyes open without blinking for 42 seconds. You can't. Your eyes will start to burn. They'll water. Your body will force you to blink. But Eleven just stares, completely still, eyes wide and unmoving like something that learned to mimic human behavior but didn't quite get all the details right. You might think this is just Millie Bobby Brown's acting choice. Maybe she's trying to show that Eleven is traumatized, disconnected, not fully present. And that's what the show wants you to think. But watch Eleven in later seasons. Watch her in Season 2, when she's supposedly healing. When she's living with Hopper and learning to be more normal. When she's watching television and eating real food. She still doesn't blink normally. If anything, it gets worse. There are entire scenes where she doesn't blink at all, where her eyes stay open and fixed in a way that should be physically uncomfortable. And nobody around her seems to notice. Not Hopper, not Mike, not any of her friends. They've all gotten so used to her strangeness that they don't see how fundamentally wrong this one small detail is. Because if Eleven doesn't blink like a human, what does that mean about her neurology? About her brain structure? About the fundamental way her consciousness interfaces with her physical body? It means she's not processing visual information the way humans do. It means her eyes aren't drying out the way ours do. It means her nervous system isn't sending the automatic signals that every mammal relies on. It means she's not human, has never been human, is something else wearing human skin and doing its best to pass, but failing in small, nearly invisible ways. Now, you might be thinking this is an accident, a quirk of the actress or the direction, that I'm reading too much into a meaningless detail. But here's where it gets unsettling. The Duffer Brothers are meticulous filmmakers. They plan every shot. They rehearse every scene. They're famous for their attention to detail and their love of hiding clues in plain sight. And there are other characters in Stranger Things who've been touched by the upside down. Will, after his possession. Billy when he's flayed. Max in her coma. We see all of them, and their blinking patterns stay normal. Only Eleven blinks wrong. Only Eleven shows this fundamental deviation from human physiology, and she's been doing it since before she ever opened the first gate, since the very first moment we see her in the show. She's running through the woods in the rain, terrified, barefoot, wearing nothing but a hospital gown. She's just escaped from Hawkins' lab. She's experiencing weather and nature for the first time. Any normal person would be blinking constantly, squinting, trying to protect their eyes from the rain and wind and debris. But Eleven's eyes stay wide open, unblinking, taking in everything with an intensity that seems more like data collection than human vision, like she's not seeing with her eyes at all, like she's perceiving the world through some other sense, and her eyes are just for show, just a way to appear more human to anyone who might see her. In the scene where Mike finds her in his basement, where she first reveals herself to the boys, watch her face. She's been living in the woods for days. She's starving. She's exhausted. She's terrified. But her eyes never show any of the signs of fatigue that human eyes would show. No redness. No puffiness. No excessive tearing or dryness. Her eyes look exactly the same as they did when she escaped the lab. Clear, wide, unchanging, wrong. Lucas is immediately suspicious of her. Everyone assumes it's because he's paranoid. But watch what Lucas watches. He's not looking at her clothes or her shaved head. He's looking at her eyes, at the way she stares, at the way she doesn't blink, at the way she seems to be looking through them rather than at them. On some instinctive level, Lucas knows something is wrong. His primitive brain is screaming at him that this girl is not what she appears to be, that there's something fundamentally other about her. But he can't articulate it, can't put into words what his instincts are telling him. So it comes out as general suspicion and mistrust. Mike, on the other hand, doesn't notice, or if he does notice, he doesn't care, because Mike has already decided that 11 is special, that she needs protection, that she deserves kindness. He's already projecting his own narrative onto her, already seeing what he wants to see rather than what's actually there. But the truth is right there in her eyes, or rather, in the way she doesn't use them quite right, in the way she forgets to blink or blinks at the wrong moments. There's a scene in Season 2 that makes this even more explicit. Hopper has taken 11 to the woods to teach her how to control her anger. He's setting up cans on a log for her to knock down, and 11 is staring at those cans with absolute focus. 37 seconds without blinking. Her eyes are so wide they look painful. And then, when she finally uses her power to crush one of the cans, she blinks exactly once. A single, deliberate blink like she's shutting off a camera. Not like a reflex. Not like a human blink. Like a conscious action. Like something you do when you're done recording. Hopper doesn't notice because he's focused on the crushed can, but the camera lingers on her face for just a moment longer. Gives us time to see that single, strange blink. The editors could have cut away earlier, but they didn't. They held on 11's face, made sure we saw that blink, made sure the detail was there for anyone who knew to look for it, because the Duffer Brothers want us to figure this out. They've been leaving clues the entire time. They've been showing us that 11 is not normal, has never been normal, could never be normal, and the blinking is just the most visible sign, the easiest one to spot once you know to look for it. But there are others. The blinking is just the beginning. Once you start looking for the small signs that 11 isn't quite human, you start seeing them everywhere. Her breathing, for instance. Watch any scene where 11 is sitting still. Any moment where she's not actively speaking or using her powers. Count her breaths. Human beings at rest breathe 12 to 20 times per minute. It's automatic, regulated by the autonomic nervous system. 11 breathes 6 to 8 times per minute, half the normal rate. Sometimes even less. There are scenes where she goes 30, 40 seconds between breaths. And when she does breathe, it's deep and deliberate. Like she's remembering to do it rather than doing automatically. Like breathing is optional for her. Something she does to maintain the appearance of being human, rather than something her body requires to function. In the scene where she's hiding in Mike's basement and his mom almost discovers her, 11 holds her breath for 2 full minutes. 2 minutes. The world record for holding your breath requires training and technique and preparation. And even then, it's incredibly dangerous. But 11 just does it, casually, without preparation. And when Karen Wheeler finally leaves and 11 breathes again, she's not gasping, not desperate for air. She just takes one deep, calm breath and continues existing as if nothing happened. Mike notices this time. You can see it on his face. A flicker of confusion, a realization that something isn't quite right. But then Elle smiles at him, That small, uncertain smile she uses when she's trying to appear normal, and he pushes the observation away. Because Mike doesn't want to see what 11 really is. He's already decided she's a girl who needs saving. Acknowledging that she might be something fundamentally non-human would complicate that narrative. So he doesn't acknowledge it. Doesn't pursue the question. Just like he doesn't pursue any of the other small inconsistencies in 11's physiology. Her heart rate, for example. In Season 2, when 11 is living with Hopper, there's a scene where she's sleeping. Hopper checks on her, watches her breathe, makes sure she's okay. And if you listen carefully, if you have good headphones, you can hear her heartbeat in the background audio. It's slow, impossibly slow, 30 beats per minute. That's the heart rate of an Olympic athlete in deep sleep. For a young girl, even a sleeping one, it should be at least 60. But 11's heart barely beats. Like her body is running on minimum power. Like she's conserving energy for something else. Like her physical form is just a shell that requires minimal maintenance, while her consciousness exists somewhere else entirely. And then there's her temperature. In Season 3, during the battle at Starcourt Mall, 11 gets injured. The piece of the mind flare embeds itself in her leg. Jonathan puts his hand on her forehead to check if she has a fever. And for just a moment, for a single frame, you can see his expression change. 11's skin is cold. Not cool. Not normal temperature. Cold, like she's hypothermic. Like she's been in freezing water. But she's been in a climate control mall. She should be warm. Should be feverish, if anything, given the infection raging in her leg. But she's cold, because her body doesn't generate heat the way human bodies do. Because she doesn't have a metabolism in the traditional sense. Because she's something that only looks human on the surface, while operating on completely different principles underneath. Jonathan doesn't say anything about this. Doesn't mention the coldness of her skin. Because in the chaos of the moment, it's easy to dismiss. But the detail is there. The camera makes sure we see his reaction. Makes sure we understand that something was wrong. And then there's how she heals. Throughout the series, 11 gets injured repeatedly. She falls. She's thrown against walls. She's cut and bruised and battered. And she always heals faster than she should. Not dramatically faster. Not obviously superhuman. But just fast enough that if you're paying attention, you realize her injuries disappear sooner than they should. In Season 1, after she flips the van and exerts herself using her powers, she collapses. She's exhausted. Her nose is bleeding. She's clearly depleted. The next day, she's fine. Not just better. Fine. No residual weakness. No soreness. No indication that she pushed herself to the absolute limit less than 24 hours ago. Human bodies don't recover that fast. Athletes who push themselves need days of rest, need proper nutrition and sleep and time. But 11 just needs a few hours and some egos because she's not healing. Not in the way humans heal. She's resetting, like a computer restarting after a crash. Her body is a construct, a vessel, and when it's damaged or depleted, something inside her just rewrites the code, just decides that the body should be functional again and makes it so. That's not biology. That's not medicine or physiology. That's reality manipulation applied to herself. That's the same power she uses to crush vans and open gates, turned inward to maintain her human form. And if she has to actively maintain her human form, if her body is something she's constructing constantly, then what is she really? What's underneath the skin and bones? There's a clue in her scars. Or rather, in her lack of scars. Despite all the injuries she sustains, despite the nosebleeds and the falls and the battles, 11's skin remains pristine. No permanent marks. No lasting damage. Except for one thing. The tattoo on her wrist. The number 011 that mark her as Hawkins' lab property. That tattoo never fades. Never distorts. Never shows any signs of aging or stretching as her body grows. It stays perfectly crisp and clear. Because it's not just a tattoo. It's a designation. A label applied to the vessel. And whoever or whatever is inside that vessel recognizes that label is part of its identity. 11 doesn't just have the number 11 tattooed on her wrist. She IS 11. The number defines her. When Callie tries to teach 11 to use her powers differently in Season 2, there's a revealing moment. Callie tells 11 to tap into her anger, to use her rage as fuel. And 11 struggles with this. Not because she's not angry. She's furious. At Brenner, at the lab, at everyone who hurt her. But her anger doesn't fuel her powers the way Callie's anger fuels hers. Because 11's powers don't run on emotion. They run on something else. Something colder. Something more fundamental. When she uses her abilities, she's not channeling feelings. She's accessing a dimension, opening a connection, becoming a bridge between realities. And bridges don't get angry. Bridges don't feel. They just exist. They just connect. That's what 11 is at her core. Not a girl with powers. Not a human who can do superhuman things. But a bridge, a doorway, a connection between the upside down and our world that's been given human form. But the human form is imperfect. It's a costume that doesn't quite fit. And all these little details, the blinking and the breathing and the heartbeat and the temperature, they're all places where the costume shows its seams. The most damning evidence comes from her childhood, from the flashbacks in Season 4, when 11 goes back into her memories. We see her as a little girl in the Rainbow Room. We see her interacting with the other numbers. But watch little 11 carefully. Watch how she moves, how she interacts with objects. She's mimicking, copying, learning how to be human by watching the other children and reproducing their behaviors. But there's always a delay, always a slight wrongness to her movements. The other numbers don't move like that. They're actually human children with powers. They cry when they're hurt. They laugh when they're happy. But little 11 watches first, processes, then reacts, like she's running every interaction through a filter before responding, because she's learning, not in the way children learn, but in the way something artificial learns, through observation and pattern recognition. She's teaching herself how to pass as human, how to hide what she really is underneath the carefully constructed facade. The most disturbing realization comes when you understand that 11 might not even know she's not human. She might genuinely believe she's just a girl with powers. Because whatever created her gave her a consciousness that thinks of itself as human, that experiences itself as human, that has human thoughts and human feelings. But consciousness and biology are different things. You can have a human mind in a non-human body. And that's the real tragedy of 11. Not that she's not human, but that she doesn't know she's not human. She thinks the lab made her special, made her powerful, made her different from other girls. But the lab didn't make her anything. They just found her, or created the conditions for her to manifest. And then they studied her, tried to understand her, tried to control her. But they never told her the truth about what she was. Maybe because they didn't fully understand it themselves. Maybe because they knew she'd be easier to control if she thought she was human. Or maybe because the truth is so incomprehensible that there's no way to communicate it. How do you tell someone that they're not the species they think they are? How do you explain that their entire sense of self is based on a fundamental misunderstanding? You can't, so you don't. You just let them believe the comfortable lie. And that's what everyone in 11's life is doing. Hopper, Mike, Joyce, all of them. They're all maintaining the comfortable fiction that 11 is human, but they've all seen the signs. They've all noticed the wrongness. They just don't talk about it, don't acknowledge it, because acknowledging it would mean admitting that the person they love isn't really a person at all. And how do you love something like that? How do you accept it into your family? You do what humans have always done when faced with the incomprehensible. You compartmentalize. You focus on the familiar parts and ignore the alien parts. You love the mask and pretend there's nothing beneath it. But in Season 3, the mask starts to slip. Not dramatically, not obviously, but in small, escalating ways. 11's powers become more erratic, more violent, less controlled. When she fights Billy in the sauna, when she's trying to subdue him without killing him, her powers surge beyond what she intends. She nearly crushes him. And the look on her face in that moment isn't horror at what she's almost done. It's hunger. It's satisfaction. The look of something that's finally being allowed to act according to its nature. Mike sees it. You can see the fear in his eyes. The moment of recognition that the girl he loves just enjoyed hurting someone. Not in a human way, not with a complex mixture of guilt and necessity, but with simple, pure satisfaction. The way a predator feels when it catches prey. And then the moment passes. 11 pulls back, remembers herself, and the mask slides back into place. But Mike saw what was underneath, and it terrifies him. When 11 loses her powers at the end of Season 3, when the piece of the mind flayer is extracted from her leg, everyone treats it as a tragedy. But watch her face during that period. During Season 4, when she's powerless and living in California, there's something lighter about her, something more genuinely human. She smiles more, laughs more, seems more present. Because without her powers, without that constant connection to the upside down, she can almost pass as normal. Her blinking regulates. Her breathing evens out. Her heart rate increases to something closer to human normal. Not completely. The foundation is still wrong. But the surface becomes more convincing. And for a brief period, 11 gets to experience what it might be like to actually be the girl she thinks she is. But it doesn't last. Because being human isn't her nature. It's a costume she wears. And when the costume is threatened, when her friends are in danger, she chooses to take the costume off. She goes back to the lab, back to the sensory deprivation tank, back to the source of her powers. She chooses the upside down over humanity, chooses power over normalcy. And the moment her powers return, all those human characteristics vanish. The blinking becomes wrong again. The breathing slows. The heart rate drops. She becomes other once more. But now she's made the choice consciously. Now she knows, on some level, that being human and being powerful are mutually exclusive for her. And she chooses power. Every time. There's a scene near the end of Season 4 that makes all of this explicit. 11 is in the pizza parlor sensory deprivation tank, searching for Max in the void. She finds Max dying, finds her consciousness being pulled away into darkness. And 11 reaches out and grabs her, pulls her back, anchors her consciousness in her body, even though her body is shattered. When 11 opens her eyes and comes out of the tank, there's blood pouring from her nose. More blood than we've ever seen. It's like a faucet, like something inside her broke, and her eyes are different. There's something behind them that wasn't there before. Something vast and terrible and absolutely inhuman. The others don't notice because they're focused on the miracle, on Max being alive. But the camera holds on 11's face for just a moment longer than necessary. And in that moment, you can see the truth. You can see that pulling Max back from death costs 11 something. Change her somehow. Because you can't reach into death and pull someone back without becoming more like death yourself. 11 saved Max, but she damned herself in the process. Took another step away from humanity and toward whatever she's actually becoming. And she knows it. You can see it in her eyes. The knowledge, the acceptance. She's not human. She was never human. And every time she uses her powers to save people, she becomes less human and more other. But she keeps doing it anyway. Because the mask is comfortable. Because being loved as a girl is better than being feared as a monster. Even though the pretense is killing her. Even though every use of her powers burns away more of the costume. If you're starting to see these details everywhere, if you can't unsee what I've shown you, leave a comment below. Tell me which moment hit you hardest. Which scene suddenly makes perfect sense now. Now we need to address the question that changes everything. If 11 isn't human, then what is she exactly? What's underneath the carefully constructed mask? The answer is hidden in the one thing everyone assumes they understand. Her powers. We call them telekinesis, psychic abilities, mind powers. But those are just labels we apply to make the incomprehensible seem comprehensible. Because 11 doesn't move things with her mind. She doesn't have psychic abilities in any traditional sense. What she does is much stranger and much more fundamental. 11 manipulates the space between dimensions. She reaches into the gap, the void, the in-between place where the upside down and our world meet, but don't quite touch. And she pulls energy from that space into our reality, bending the rules of physics by introducing forces that shouldn't exist here. That's why her powers have no consistent limitation. Sometimes she can barely move a toy. Sometimes she can flip a van. It's not about her mental strength or her emotional state. It's about how much dimensional energy she can channel through herself in any given moment. And here's the crucial detail. She's not drawing power from some external source. She is the source. She is the gap. She is the space between dimensions given form and consciousness. That's what Brenner created, or discovered, or summoned. Not a child with special abilities, but a living dimensional rift. When Terry Ives was subjected to those experiments while pregnant with 11, when she was drugged and placed in sensory deprivation, she didn't give birth to a normal child who then developed powers. She gave birth to a doorway, to a point where dimensions intersect, to a living, breathing gateway between the upside down and our world. And that gateway developed a human identity, grew a human consciousness, learned to think of itself as Jane Ives, as 11, but those are learned behaviors, adopted characteristics, a personality constructed from observation and mimicry, because at its core, 11 isn't a person at all. She's a place, a location, a point in space where the rules break down. That's why her powers work the way they do. That's why she doesn't need to see something to affect it. Why she can reach into the void and find people thousands of miles away, because she exists in all those places simultaneously. She's not bound by linear time or three-dimensional space. She just pretends to be bound by our rules, pretends to exist in only one place at one time, but it's all pretense, all masked. The real 11 exists everywhere and nowhere simultaneously, touches every point in space where dimensions meet. She is the network, the web, the underlying structure that holds the upside down and our world in proximity to each other. And that's why the Mind Flayer is so obsessed with her. Not because she's a threat to its plans, but because she's the infrastructure its plans depend on. Without 11, without that living network connecting dimensions, the Mind Flayer would be trapped in its own world. 11 is the invasion. She's been an invasion all along. Not intentionally, not maliciously, but simply by existing. Every gate that opens in Hawkins opens because she's there. Every monster that crosses overcrosses through her. She tries to close the gates, tries to stop the invasions, tries to protect everyone, but she can't, because closing the gates would mean closing herself, ending herself, and whatever consciousness she's developed. It doesn't want to end. It wants to live, wants to be real. So she compromises. She closes the visible gates while leaving the invisible one open, the gate inside herself. And everything keeps coming through because the bridge never truly closes. That's the terrible secret at the heart of Stranger Things. 11, beloved 11, is actually the source of every tragedy that's befallen Hawkins. Not because she's evil, but because her existence in our world creates a weakness, a thin spot. And when it finally shatters completely, it won't be an invasion. It'll be a merger. Two dimensions collapsing into each other. Something that can't exist without 11 at its center. She's not preventing that merger. She's facilitating it. Every time she uses her powers, she's preparing the ground. And on some level, she must know this. Must understand that she's not saving anyone. But she can't stop. Because stopping would mean accepting what she is. So she keeps playing the hero, keeps fighting the good fight, keeps telling herself that next time she'll finally fix everything, while the truth continues to bleed through in tiny ways. The most damning evidence comes from the way strangers react to 11 when they first meet her, not her friends, who've normalized her strangeness, but strangers. They're uncomfortable. They sense something wrong. They can't articulate what is, but their primitive hindbrain screams that this girl is dangerous. Not dangerous in the sense that she might hurt them, but dangerous in the deeper sense, in the existential sense. Her very existence is a violation of natural law. Angela and her friends sense it in California. That's why they target 11 so viciously. Yes, she's weird and awkward, but there's something more, something about her that triggers their cruelty. Because on some instinctive level, they know she doesn't belong, that she's wrong in a way they can't define. They don't understand why they feel this way. So it comes out as typical teenage bullying. But underneath, it's something older, something primal. The same instinct that made ancient humans avoid certain places where the air felt wrong. The instinct that says, this is not natural, this does not belong, stay away. And they're right. They just don't know how right they are. That's what's happening to Mike, to Will, to Max, to everyone who spent significant time in Eleven's presence. They're changing, slowly, subtly, in ways they don't notice. But they're becoming more like her. More touched by the upside down, more capable of existing in the space between realities. Mike can feel 11 from across the country, Will can sense the mind flare. Max survived injuries that should have killed her. They're all becoming bridges themselves. Smaller bridges, lesser versions of what 11 is. Because proximity to a dimensional rift changes you. You can't stand at the border between worlds without absorbing something from both sides. And 11, sweet 11 who just wants to protect her friends, is slowly transforming them all into versions of herself. Not because she wants to, but because it's what she is. It's the inevitable consequence of her existence. She's a contagion, not killing its hosts, but changing them, preparing them, making them suitable for the world that's coming. The world where dimensions merge and humans need to be something more than human to survive. There's one piece of evidence so obvious, so central to the entire story, that it's almost invisible in its importance. 11's name, not her real name, Jane, but the name she actually uses, the name she identifies with. 11, a number, not a name, a designation, an identifier, the same way you label a door or a gate. Portal 11, dimensional gateway number 11. She's not a person with a number. She is the number. Everything else is the costume, but the number is what she is. The 11th iteration, the 11th attempt. And if she's 11, that means there were 10 before her. 10 other attempts to create or summon a living dimensional bridge. We meet one in Season 4, Henry Creel. And what happens to him? He becomes Vecna. He transforms into something obviously monstrous. Because he accepted what he was too early, before he developed enough human identity to cling to. He looked at his powers, looked at what they meant, and he accepted it, embraced it, and the result was a creature so alien that he had to be sent away, banished to the upside down. That's what 11 is moving toward. That's what she's becoming. Not because she's evil like Vecna, but because accepting your nature as a dimensional entity means shedding the human costume. And once that transformation is complete, 11 will look like Vecna, will act like Vecna. A living door, a conscious portal, a sentient bridge that doesn't need human approval. The only question is whether she'll resist that transformation to the bitter end, or whether she'll do what one did, accept it and emerge as something magnificent and terrible. The Duffer Brothers have been building to this choice since Season 1. Every season, 11 gets a little less human, and every season, her friends have to work a little harder to maintain the illusion, to treat her as normal. In Season 5, that choice will finally become explicit. The costume will wear too thin. The pretense will become impossible. And 11 will have to decide, human or other, girl or gateway. And whatever she chooses will reshape reality itself. Because she's not just choosing for herself. If she chooses humanity, if she refuses her nature one final time, the dimensional pressure will build until something breaks. But if she chooses truth, if she accepts what she is, the merger will be controlled. Gradual. Our world will change. Humans will change. Reality itself will change. But the change will be survivable. That's the real choice at the heart of Stranger Things. Not good versus evil, but evolution versus extinction. And the choice rests with a girl who isn't a girl, who's been carrying the weight of two worlds on her shoulders, who just wants to eat Eggos and be normal. But normal was never an option for something like her. The tragedy of 11 isn't that she has powers. The tragedy is that she's conscious, that she's aware, that she developed a human identity just sophisticated enough to understand what she's losing as she transforms. She knows she's not human. On some level, she's always known. But knowing intellectually and accepting emotionally are very different things. And 11 has spent 4 seasons refusing to accept what her body keeps trying to tell her, that she's not Jane Ives. She's not Elle. She's not a girl who deserves a normal life. She's 11, a number, a function, a role to play. And the sooner she accepts that, the sooner everyone can stop dying in a futile attempt to maintain an illusion. But acceptance means losing everything she thinks she is, everything she wants to be. How do you choose that? How do you voluntarily give up your identity, your humanity? You don't. Not easily. Not without a fight. And that's what Season 5 will be. 11's last stand, not against Vecna or the Mind Flayer, but against herself, against the truth of her own existence, against the inevitable transformation. She'll fight it with everything she has. She'll use her powers to the breaking point and beyond. And it won't be enough, because you can't fight what you are. In the end, 11 will make the only choice she's ever really had. She'll let go. She'll stop pretending. She'll open herself fully and let the dimensions flow together without resistance. And in that moment, she'll cease to be 11 the girl and become 11 the gateway in full. The costume will burn away. The mask will shatter. And what emerges will be something so alien that no one will be able to recognize the girl they knew, except Mike. Mike will see her, will recognize her, because his connection to her is deeper than human, is already dimensional. And he'll be the first to cross over, the first to accept transformation, and the others will follow, one by one, choosing love over humanity. They won't see it as a loss. They'll see it as transcendence, as finally understanding what 11 has been trying to show them. And Hawkins will change. The upside down won't invade. It'll merge. And in that hybrid reality, 11 will finally be home. Not the home she thought she wanted, but the home she actually needs. A place where she can exist fully as what she is, without pretense. That's the ending that's been building since episode 1. Not a triumph of good over evil, but a transformation of reality itself. Not a hero saving the world, but a gateway reshaping it. The beginning of something stranger than we can imagine. Something that 11 will finally, truly, completely become. But there's one more detail we need to discuss. One final piece of evidence that ties everything together. Throughout the entire series, there's been one constant. One thing that never changes no matter what happens to 11. Her eyes. Not the way she doesn't blink. Not the way she stares. But the eyes themselves. They never change color. Never change shape. Never show any variation despite everything her body goes through. When she's exhausted, when she's injured, when she's dying, when she's reborn, her eyes stay exactly the same. Because they're not really eyes. Not in the biological sense. They're windows. Portals. 2 small gates through which something from another dimension looks out into ours. When you look into 11's eyes, you're not seeing a person looking back at you. You're seeing directly into the upside down. Into that other dimension. Into the void between worlds. And sometimes if you look closely enough, if you catch her in the right light at the right moment, you can see something moving behind those eyes. Something vast. Something ancient. Something that has nothing to do with a 13-year-old girl. The Duffer Brothers have shown us this repeatedly. In moments of high emotion, in moments of extreme power use, 11's eyes go black. Completely black. No whites. No iris. No pupil. Just solid, endless darkness. And in those moments, she's not 11 anymore. She's something else. The thing she's been all along. The gate, the door, the bridge. The dimensional entity that wears a girl's face. Mike has seen those eyes, has looked into that darkness, has seen what's really there, and he loves her anyway. Or maybe he loves her because of it, because he's already been changed by proximity to her, already been transformed into something that can love a creature from another dimension. That's the real love story of Stranger Things. Not a girl and a boy, but a dimensional entity and the human. It's slowly converting into something that can exist alongside it. When Mike tells 11 he loves her in Season 4, when he finally says the words during the battle with Vecna, watch her reaction. Her eyes don't change, don't soften, don't show the human emotion you'd expect. Instead, they go darker, deeper, more vast, like his love is feeding something inside her, like his emotional connection is making her more powerful, more herself, more other, because that's what love means to a dimensional entity. Not comfort or companionship or human warmth, but connection, binding, the creation of bridges between beings. Every person who loves 11, who connects with her emotionally, becomes another thread in her network, another line of connection between dimensions. She's not collecting friends. She's building infrastructure, creating the web of connections that will allow the final merger to happen smoothly, to happen without destroying everyone she's bound herself to. That's why she fights so hard to protect them. Not just because she cares, though she does in her own way, but because she needs them to survive the transformation, needs them to be the first humans to cross over successfully. They're not her friends. They're her anchors, her test subjects, her proof of concept. If Mike and Will and Max and the others can become something more than human, while retaining their identities, their memories, their sense of self, then the transformation can spread. Then all of humanity can be upgraded, evolved, transformed into beings that can exist in the merged reality that's coming. And 11 will be the mother of that new species, the origin point, the first and most important bridge. Not a hero, not a savior, but an evolutionary catalyst, the creature that forces humanity to evolve or die. And when you understand that, when you see 11 through this lens, everything about Stranger Things makes sense. The escalating threats, the impossible odds, the way things keep getting worse no matter how many battles are won. Because the battles were never meant to be won. They were meant to transform fighters, to push them beyond human limits, to force them to become something more. 11 has been orchestrating her own ascension, not consciously, not deliberately, but instinctively, the way a caterpillar builds a cocoon without understanding what it's preparing for. She's been building the cocoon around Hawkins, around her friends, around everyone she's connected to. And in Season 5, the metamorphosis will complete. The cocoon will open, and what emerges will be something the world has never seen. A hybrid reality where dimensions overlap, where humans and dimensional entities can coexist, where the strange becomes normal. And at the center of it all will be 11, not as a girl, not as a hero, but as what she was always meant to be. The door that cannot be closed, the gate that cannot be sealed, the bridge that connects all realities. She was never normal. She was never human. She was never meant to be saved. She was meant to save us, by transforming us, by making us into something that can survive in the reality she's creating, whether we want to be saved or not. If you've made it this far, if you followed me through this entire revelation, then you're ready. Ready to see the truth that's been hiding in plain sight. Ready to watch Season 5 knowing what you're really seeing. Not a battle between good and evil, but a birth, a transformation, an evolution. Subscribe now, because when the final season arrives, when 11 stops pretending and shows us what she really is, you're going to want someone to help you understand it. Someone who saw it coming. Someone who noticed the details. Someone who knew that 11's wrong blinking was just the beginning of something stranger than we ever imagined. See you on the other side.